Our next guest is here to detail what has been described as the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. Now, we've been bringing you periodic updates on the toxic chemical spill in East Palestine, Ohio, largely via on-the-ground reporting from independent journalists at Status Coup, headed by our guest today, Jordan Chariton. Now, Jordan joins us himself to preview a scathing new documentary that digs into the water crisis that started it all in Flint, Michigan. 10 years after the initial Flint reporting, no meaningful change or improvements have been made. Citizens living there are plagued with cancers, neurological and cognitive impairment, or have been left for dead, and some are still subjected to the consequences of the Flint water crisis and lead poisoning.
Status Coup released a documentary on Sunday chronicling the failed response in Flint. Here's a sneak peek.
What matters right now is this, that Flint River right there is still right there, okay? And those people that are victims of what was played on them are still victims. The 7,000 babies are still brain damaged. The fact of the matter is now. What do you do about it now? You left a lot of people dead and laying in the street, and you still got people dead and laying in the street. Excuse my French.
Joining us now is journalist for Status Coup, Jordan Chariton, who helped produce this documentary titled Flint Fatigue. Welcome back to Rising.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us. So it's 10 years later. Has the situation improved for the people of Flint?
No. In many cases, it's worse because the effects of, heavy metal poisoning, lead, there was a whole lot of other things in that water, take time to manifest. Some people develop cancer within 2 or 3 years after the switch, some 5, some 10. There is epidemic of cancer, kidney failure, liver disease, not to mention the permanent damage in children when we're talking about learning disabilities, volatile mood swings, which manifest into crime, autism, and other effects. And they do not have free health care from the government, where other places with similar disasters have gotten that. And really scandalously, no one has been held accountable criminally.
Jordan, remind us that this isn't just a kind of an environmental catastrophe, but a political cover-up that also implicates people who were considered at the time to be good faith actors like President Barack Obama. Remind us how this started as a sort of corporate capitalism kind of a choice here that started this entire crisis off.
Yeah, the narrative has been wrong from the beginning from mainstream media. The depiction that this was just a tragedy born from government officials trying to save money. This was actually to try and make money. There was a privatization scheme to create a brand new water system in the area Flint is in, and to get Flint, which was legally not allowed to borrow any more money, it was near bankruptcy, to borrow nearly $100 million to help fund the construction of a brand new water system. Not to get too in the weeds, but Detroit was providing Flint its water for 50 years without major issues. But a lot of local officials wanted to bankrupt Detroit and create a regionalized, privatized water system. And they needed Flint as the final city or customer for that pipeline. This is why Flint was using the Flint River temporarily in the first place while this new water system was under construction. And there was charges filed for this allegedly fraudulent financial scheme to indebt Flint with $100 million to join a new water system, and the rest is history. They used the Flint River. They did not add the proper chemicals. They didn't even upgrade the water plant. It would be the equivalent of taking one of these Boeing flights where parts are failing midair. The water plant was the equivalent of getting on a 757 while they're adding the parts midair. So it was basically Wall Street banks, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, that issued the bonds for Flint to join this new water system.
So I'm so glad you brought blowing up, because it does seem like a pattern is emerging, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an incident like Flint, there's incidents like East Palestine, there was just another trail derailment in New Mexico. There's the whole Boeing kerfuffle, which again, in all of these stories, it does seem to be the case that behind the scenes, there is some version of congressional lobbying to get liability waivers to prevent the kind of regulations that could prevent some of these accidents from taking place in the first place. And the thread throughout all of them is that when there are these instances of enormous malfeasance, either on the part of government actors or the people who pay them off, the costs are borne overwhelmingly and disproportionately and with no relief or very little relief from the government by the communities, which are overwhelming and disproportionately low-income and working-class communities. That was certainly the case in East Palestine. It seems also to be the case in Flint.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at East Palestine, which you guys have reported on, a couple of weeks ago, the NTSB chair testified, speaking with Senator Vance, that Norfolk Southern literally hid from the Ohio governor that the owner of the chemical cars that they blew up was advising against blowing up those cars. They hid that from Governor DeWine when they recommended blowing them up. No criminal investigation has been suggested by Senator Vance. Senator Sherrod Brown happens to be up for re-election. There's other evidence that it was not necessary to blow up those cars, and it was really to open up those tracks quicker because Norfolk Southern was going to lose, potentially $1 million a day as that track was closed. Norfolk Southern has donated millions and millions of dollars to Governor DeWine, other Ohio and Pennsylvania politicians. You do the math. In the case of Flint, the state of Michigan, it was within their motivation to bury the financial fraud that led to the Flint poisoning, because if that financial fraud went forward in criminal court, the state was on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars of liability because the state signed off on the bond deal that allowed Flint to allegedly fraudulently borrow $100 million. JP Morgan and Wells Fargo would have also been on the hook potentially for hundreds of millions of dollars. So the common denominator in all those stories is you have government officials, often corporations, either working together directly or indirectly, and this revolving door where the corporations, in my view, purchase the politicians. There's no criminal accountability. I mean, it's a decade since Flint was poisoned. Not one government official, not even like a low-level person to throw under the bus, is in jail. Meanwhile, the media is hysterical about democracy.
Right. I think that's a good way to describe it. A lot of the collusion between big business and corrupt officials at the state and local level allowing something like this to happen. I remember when I'm from Michigan, I remember paying attention to the Flint issue closely, and I remember reading that state employees who lived in Flint had bottled water shipped in to their offices for a year before the public became aware of the problem with the water supply in Flint, to show how much was being how much the innocent people there were being lied to. So the EPA says now the water level in Flint is safe, the level of contamination. How do the people feel? Do they trust those regulatory authorities to be being truthful with them? I remember when we've talked to people, or when we've interviewed you and some of your fellow reporters who've been on the ground in East Palestine, they don't trust necessarily what the safety officials are telling them.
Yeah, that's another narrative that frankly is BS. Most people don't know this. This is beyond Flint. The EPA's regulatory level for lead, which is 15 parts per billion, that's not a public health measurement. That's a corrosion measurement. The actual safe level for lead in your water is 0, particularly for children. There is no safe level of lead in your water. Everybody is different. So, Robbie, you could have 15 parts per billion in your water, and maybe you have a great immune system and it doesn't affect you. I could have 3 parts per billion.
I would be dead.
I could have 3 parts per billion and it could destroy my system and cause me cancer. There is no safe level. People have been fighting to strengthen these regulations, and it's not just lead. The EPA's regulations on a whole lot of chemicals are set based on corporations lobbying them, not public health. So common sense, 10 years later, they have not changed all of the pipes in Flint. They have not touched the pipes delivering water underneath the street. That's the main pipes. They have not fully replaced the service lines. Those are the water pipes from your curb into your home. And they have not touched the interior plumbing in people's homes. That's why we named the documentary Flint Fatigue, when former Mayor Karen Weaver asked current Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who the media is slobbering over, to run for president in 4 years. When she asked Gretchen Whitmer for help in getting more funding to replace residents' interior plumbing inside their homes, which had toxic water going through it for 2 years, she was told by Governor Whitmer, this is according to the mayor, the state has Flint fatigue. I can't help you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm glad you brought this back to the contemporary political context. Outside of kind of local politics, I do wonder if there has been any attention at all from any of the presidential candidates, as you've observed, that would be willing to attend to this again, who don't have Flint fatigue. I'm thinking in particular about RFK Jr., if only because he spent so much of his career as an environmental lawyer, really touting cleaning up, what was it, the Hudson and things like that. Have you heard any indication or seen any indication that this is an issue that a potential candidate might finally take seriously?
No. President Biden, frankly, was the vice president to President Obama, who went to Flint, did a photo op with a glass of water that I'm not even sure was Flint water, to be honest. So vice president, he was vice president, now he's president. He is pushing the narrative that this is now a recovery rather than a crisis. Donald Trump, when he became president, had the opportunity to rectify it. He did nothing. And RFK, I will give him credit, did visit Flint a couple weeks ago, but I haven't seen anything from him policy-wise. I know Cornel West has visited Flint in the past. Jill Stein has commented on it, but I don't see a plan. And frankly, your viewers might not know this. Libby, Montana, which is 96% white, they had an asbestos disaster, I believe in the 2000s. Hundreds of people died. And Max Baucus, who is the Montana senator, he played hardball with Obama and said, I'll give you my vote for Obamacare, which Obama needed every Democrat to vote for it, but you have to give my people free health care. Why does Libby, Montana, which they should have free health care for their health disaster, have universal health care, but the people of Flint, majority black, do not? Flint right now has one of the fastest growing cancer rates in America. It is not from the weather. It's from the water. They don't have universal health care. The pipes haven't been replaced. No one is in jail. And I talk to residents who are begging for help for their kids, for learning disabilities, special education needs, mental health therapy. There is a huge increase in teen suicides because those teens were kids when this happened. And lead damages your brain. It affects your mood. I want people to know, and I hope they get from the documentary, this is not, people become numb to the word crisis because we have a crisis every day in a variety of different topics. This is still a crisis. It's not better. It's a disaster. I talk to residents who are still getting rashes, still getting discolored water, still smelly water. And I already mentioned the cancer and other things.
Jordan, thank you so much for, one, continuing this reporting when so many others have been fatigued, and for joining us here today. Can you let the listeners know one more time where they can find your documentary?
Yes, thanks to Breaking Points, who premiered it yesterday, so you can check it out on Breaking Points channel. We also have it on our website, flintfatigue.com, where you could watch the documentary for free. And we also have behind-the-scenes content, and the full interviews for the documentary are on flintfatigue.com.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.